right, welcome everyone to another episode of Demystifying Mental Health with Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist. Y'all, it is time to evolve. I know you see it. I know you see it. Like in what's happening in the world today, there's so many challenges that we're facing, and today we're going to tackle a very critical issue: how words build worlds. Okay, how words build worlds. Because with every sentence that we utter right now, we are shaping our lives. And this topic is so near and dear to my heart because the words that we use every day are having a profound impact on our mental health and our behaviors, and ultimately the world that we all have to live in, the world that we create around us. So I am so excited about my guest today. I'm going to be joined in just a bit by Dr. Maiysha Clairborne, a renowned physician, thought leader, author, and neurolinguistic programming trainer. NLP, neurolinguistic program, that is really an important field that addresses how our brain takes in information. And so I'm so excited that Dr. Maiysha is going to share her passion about equity and inclusiveness. And she's dedicated her entire career to teaching about how to master communication and thought habits and create psychologically safe environments. Did you hear that? Psychologically safe. See, when we think about, we're talking a lot these days about violence and what violence is and what it is not. But most people think that violence has to mean bodily harm. Somebody has to touch you. We're going to talk today about how violence does not have to be a touch. Okay? Listen, you all, this, share this with somebody today. Someone that you know has been impacted, has been triggered by the things that are happening in society today. Like this episode and share it with somebody that you know is looking for answers about how do we change the way we deal with words. In this episode, we'll explore the science of words and how our brain translates and forms them, right? We're going to discuss extreme examples from public figures like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene to the incident with Diddy, and how words have a profound impact on us. Language has a profound impact on us. These examples will help us understand how words shape our mental health and influence our actions positively and negatively, right? We have to understand that these are words are a sword that can cut both ways, okay? So language is more than just communication. It's a powerful tool that can build or destroy. And in the African American community, where we faced generations of systemic oppression and trauma, understanding the power of our words is crucial. We have to become more aware of how violent communication has, the cycle of violent communication perpetuates trauma. Y'all, we still have to heal from the trauma of slavery. And part of that is how we talk to each other. Come on, we're going to get deep today. But in this episode, we're going to talk about how we can break those cycles and create healthier, more supportive environments for ourselves and ones. I'm going to share my own story and the challenge that I have in addressing this within my own household and my family. So, we're also going to discuss how enhancing our emotional vocabulary can transform our lives. A lot of times people ask me, like, the situation looks so dire for people right now, for humans, for all of our collective mental health. And they're like, what can I do immediately that will make a difference? And my answer is always get more educated about emotional vocabulary. Learn how to put words to your emotions. The more that we learn to understand our emotions, the better we become at redirecting them. And practicing these new communication habits, we actually reprogram ourselves. Yes, you can change. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you've learned, what you've been exposed to. You can grow, you can change, you can transform. You have to have the will to do it. You have to decide and make a conscious decision to evolve. So this transformation really starts with understanding the updated knowledge of the brain, biology, and emotions. And that's what we'll dive into in our discussion today. So stay tuned and join us on this journey as we unpack how words build words, how words build worlds, and let's learn together how to improve our mental health and build a thriving Black community. If that's important to you, make sure that you remember, if you find value in this discussion, consider joining my Trauma Recovery Academy membership program, and consider attending our upcoming Trauma Cure Creators Using Radical Empathy in October. Thank you for being here, and we're going to get started in this episode. I see you. Thank you so much. Happy mental health wellness month to you as well. This is so important that we are here to really dig into this is our opportunity, let me say, to dig into how can we change, how can we heal, what are the tools that are needed in order for us to prepare ourselves for this next level. Is anybody feeling like when you look at the news, when you look at what's happening in the world, you're just like, oh my gosh, the problems are so big, right? Just in the chat, if you're here with us, drop some of the things that, and even those who are seeing this on replay, type in the chat some of the challenges that the world is facing today. Just off the top of my head, I personally have recently been impacted by climate change. Okay, I live in the Houston area. You may know we've had some really significant storms that swooped through so not unexpectedly, because we knew the forecast, the storms were coming, but this was different. And the area that I live in actually experienced a EF1 tornado. And so I'm just coming out of 4 days of feeling like I was back in the 1800s and being one with nature because I had no choice, I had no power. Okay. So we're dealing with, this is the second time in the last few years that Texas has had, my area, Texas, has had multiple days without power, but I know that we've dealt with drought. We're dealing with wildfires. We're dealing with extremes of our environment. And we have yet to acknowledge, people are still debating whether or not we are responsible for negatively impacting the environment with our behaviors. The obvious answer is yes. And we're all part of it. We're all part of it. So there are way more than climate disasters happening. There's famines, there's wars, there's Sudan and Congo and Gaza and Ukraine, and we could go on with the turmoil and the tumultuous circumstances that are happening. And so I think it's important for us to step back a little bit and think about how humanity got here, okay, how we got here. And so in part, that brings me to this very important way that we are all designed, where we have these very powerful urges and surges and an invisible biology that's happening in us. And if you are a follower, you probably have heard this before, but I'm laying the groundwork that all human beings are 99.9% genetically the same. So whoever you are, if you're looking at anybody, if you're in the room with them, if you're around them, or even if you're not, whoever you might think that the people in your household are your only genetic family. I have news for you. All human beings are cousins, okay? And we all have such similarity in our DNA, but it's the 0.1% of differences that make you and I all different, like snowflakes, right? All of us are different, yet we are all the same. That's a concept that we have to hold in our minds, that even though we are different, our programming is very, very similar, whether we're male or female, or whether your skin is light all the way to the darkest hues. We are one human race with many ethnicities, with even more cultures and belief systems. But when we're talking about how we're programmed from a mental health standpoint, I'm lending you my trauma psychiatrist's eyes. When we talk about how we're designed, We're animal, human, and spirit. We have biology that forms our psychology, and our psychology, what we think, what we feel, how we calculate our thought processes, that is what shapes our actions. And then we go out and we create. Every single human being on earth is a creator. Every moment that you are alive, you are creating, you are making choices, you are having thoughts, and all of those things come out of you and create in the world. So I'm so excited to have my guest, Dr. Maiysha, here today because we're going to talk about, I say this slogan, it's time to evolve. We're going to talk about how do we evolve in how we interact with each other so that um, we can work towards a society that no longer has violence against each other. Not just talking about domestic violence, like in work, in the relationships, but how do we have better communication in our workspaces? How do we have less violence or nonviolent communication in our households, in our schools? Because we need it. It's gotten to the point where people, to say it simply, they don't know how to talk to each other, and it shows. Okay, so um, I'm getting ready to tell you all about this lovely, wonderful guest that I have today. Her name is Dr. Maiysha Clairborne. She is a physician, a thought leader, and she is the founder of Mind Remapping Co. Okay, she teaches organizations how to create psychologically safe spaces and mentally healthy environments so that they have the best leaders, the best employees, and that everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. And she is a master of teaching about equity and inclusion in healthcare, education, and corporations because she's teaching them how to master their thought habits and how to control their communication in a way that changes the harm that's created when we just throw words around. So Dr. Maiysha is a proud graduate of Emory University and Morehouse School of Medicine, as well as a 2022 TEDx Asheville speaker. And she is also the co author of Conscious Anti Racism. How do we consciously make sure that we are addressing racism? So, with no further ado, I bring to the virtual stage Dr. Maiysha Clairborne.
Hello, hello, Dr. Alauna.
Hello there. Thank you so much for for being here today, for taking this time out to just help us understand how we can change our world through our words.
Well, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be, sharing the stage with you. Well, again,
I love it. Awesome. So I have a question for you. How do you define words? What is a word?
well, so I'll kind of backtrack by saying when we think about communication, we do think about words. But word is really the encoding of the information that we take in to our nervous system. And so we are always dealing with information. People talk about the five senses, what we see, hear, feel, touch, taste, smell. We are taking in 11 million bits of information per second. Can you like imagine 11 million toothpicks falling out of the sky, right? Like pricklies, pricklies.
Mhm.
And so clearly our brain can't handle all of that, so it does have to filter it down. And so it filters it down through all of these things: our memories, our past experiences, our upbringing, our values, our beliefs, our attitudes, and then we encode it. Now here's the thing: we think in pictures. We actually think in pictures. So then
Mhm.
when everything gets filtered in, it forms the picture, but then we encode it into words. It gets encoded into our bodies as emotion, and then we start to label it as self-talk. And so that's essentially what the words are. They are the product of filtered information that is coming into our nervous system that we then give meaning to and encode into this thing that we learned as babies called words.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that explanation. And that makes so much sense because when we think about how we absorb language, right? Wherever you are as a baby, the words that you hear around you, you don't know the word. You just know there are sounds being made. And then our brain starts to understand that this sound mama, that person over there moves when I say that, or dada, or, as you begin to grow, we are encoding concepts into our brain,
Right.
and then words are just a small portion of our communication. We have to understand that words are little power packets of sound. Okay, so whatever language you speak, when you wonderful creator, okay, when you say something, it's not coming out of nowhere. Your brain is constantly processing things, and the thought that you had, okay, I want to be clear that there's no such thing as saying words without any thought. There is some kind of thought, even if it's an unconscious level thought behind it, because your words reveal on some level the thought process that you have. So sometimes I know we tell people, you weren't thinking, you weren't, what were you thinking? I wasn't thinking. I tell, that's not humanly possible. There is a thought process, but those words fly out of you, and those invisible power packets go across space. They go into the other person's ears, and then their brain has to translate what you said. And I guarantee you, they did not get it all, and they didn't get it accurately.
Correct.
What do you think about that statement, Dr. Maiysha?
I love it. You're speaking my language. You're speaking my language. One of the things that I often talk about is that, we have this picture in our brain of what we want to communicate, whether it's a picture or a movie, and then it filters through all of the things that it filters through, and then the words come out of our mouth. Yeah. And then they enter the ears of another, and they form, and it goes through all the filters, and it forms a picture. Now, that picture that the other person is forming is probably not the same as the picture that you were intending. And so that is how miscommunications and misunderstandings happen.
Yes. And I promise you, viewer, that you have done this today. You have misunderstood, you have misinterpreted. I think it's really important for us to understand the way that we're designed to understand our mental health, because when you're thinking about something, when you're experiencing something, you're not experiencing a full objective reality. You're only able to experience things from what your own body and brain and experiences can interpret and can calculate this. So you're going to use the language that your ancestors taught you, whoever that is that's colored and shaped what those words mean to you. When you see a certain behavior, that's having an attitude. When you see a certain behavior, that's crazy, quote unquote, based on how you may label that thing. So I want people to understand that all of us are using words to try to translate and understand what's going on around us. And right now, our wording is insufficient to understand our emotions, because we've never been taught about it in school. They literally teach us about all kinds of things, science and math and history, and all of that is really important. However, emotions are something that we use every single day, that we get zero formal education about. So many people are running around thinking that they don't have emotions, that other people create their emotions, the devil made me do it. Dr. Maiysha, can you talk a little bit about how what happens if we learn better language and communication for our emotions?
Well, when we learn better language, when we learn better communication, and let's be clear, you said something earlier that I think is just, I want to underpin and underline it a million times. And it's right, underline. That words are a very small part of our communication, right? They are 7% of our communication. That leaves an entire 93%. And I also want to underpin something else that you said, which are, and you said it a different way, but words are our thoughts expressed. And so when a person says you're not thinking, well, it's an inaccuracy, but it's an
Mhm.
unfiltered communication. So
Mhm.
when we begin to be able to name our emotions with words, when we begin to name them for ourselves, then we can be able to better communicate what's going on with the other person and put
Mhm.
space in between our internal reactions and our external responses, which can be huge for saving people's relationships or mitigating harm that can
Mhm.
occur from verbal or nonverbal communication. We must become aware of what we're communicating. And I think that's the first piece.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that point because as we pivot to the next component, it really makes me think about just to throw out some of the other elements that are nonverbal, right, in our communication, tone, volume. Um, what are some other things that are we use for communication? Facial expressions. What else?
Mhm. Our facial expressions, our body language,
Right.
our eye
Eye
movements, whether
contact.
they're that's
Yeah.
right, eye contact or no eye contact. And sometimes that's cultural as well, and sometimes that's something that is taught or inherited. But all of these things constitute communication. If we talk with our hands, you might notice that I'm talking a lot with my hands. A lean
Hmm.
in or a lean out, right? So
Hmm.
certain gestures. So there are so many different ways that we communicate that we are unaware that we communicate. And
Hmm.
words on top of our nonverbal communication can create worlds for people.
Hmm. Absolutely. So that is so neatly brings us to the next component of our conversation because we are in a society now that is um, just objectively struggling with people harming each other
Mhm.
through whether it's gun violence or whether it's through physically putting their hands on each other, whether it's yelling and screaming at each other uh, and uh, creating harm in that way. So I think it's really important for us to think about how we as a society, especially here in America, have not really fully dealt with the legacy of slavery and what it means to think of another human being as less than yourself,
Mhm.
right? Um, I see this space that we're in today through the lens of looking at historically how America even got here, right? There were some extremely traumatized people in Europe who were being persecuted because of their faith and their desire to practice their own belief systems. And they took the treacherous and dangerous chance to come over to a new space that they didn't even know how big America was, right? And in their coming, the settlers that came here to America looked at Native American people and were like, these are animals. We can treat them however. We can do whatever they're harming us. They're shooting at us. They don't like us, and they don't look exactly like us. So let's do whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then we're gonna go grab some African people and we're going to go over there and we're going to bring some workers and people here. And in all of that, you have to understand the delusion of their belief that you can look at another human being who's got a head in the same place as you, arms and legs and bodies, and you can mate with them and make children. That's the same species. That means that the whole time that we've been battling each other, whether it's immigrants coming into the country from other places, there's a thought process that is because you're different than me, you're a different tribe, I'm going to look down on you, I'm going to treat you terribly, I can even enslave you, force you to give me your body, force you to give me your labor, force me to give you my entire lifetime. And that mentality, even though we've shifted away from it over time with law changes that have been hard fought for, imagine we're still having to fight for just healthy, normal existence, even though we say we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, we put all this lip service to being people being created equally, but we say it in words, but it's not translating. And that for me, I think is this space where we're still sitting in damage from not dealing with past things like slavery. What do you think about that Dr. Maiysha?
Well, it's that speaks to congruency, right? The congruency of word and action, the incongruency, I should say, of word and action. But before I go there, one of the things that was coming up as you were speaking is that, when a person is told a single story or a single version of a story, whatever that might sound like, they begin to believe it. And so as we are dealing with unconsciously the impact of generations of harm being imposed upon us as a group of people, Native Americans as a group of people, even like Asian, Chinese, Japanese, like as a group of people, like the marginalization of multiple groups who didn't look like the European colonizing settlers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're told a single story, and that single story, told in various ways, is that we are less than.
Mm-hmm.
The education in schools around Black History Month being 28 days,
Yeah.
like these are nonverbal, incongruent communications or congruent communications about our worth
Yeah.
that continue to go into the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
And then what happens is we begin to believe and act accordingly, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's at the unconscious level.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the danger of a single story.
Mm. So when we have these spaces where we're looking at a society that is trying to move away from well, let me let me back up on that. I think that American culture arose with some violence in it. I think we can agree that
Absolutely.
they had to, and I don't blame our ancestors on any
Absolutely.
side of the equation. It was
Yeah,
rough out there, okay? They,
absolutely.
so I'm so thankful after these last few days with no power. I'm so grateful for modern conveniences. I'm
Yeah,
like, ooh, thank you. I'm so glad it's 2024. This is really the best time in human history to be alive. we have
absolutely.
these
Yeah.
we have these modern conveniences, we have technologies, we have all of these things that have advanced, but what we now need to advance is our way of thinking about ourselves and
Correct.
really understanding human identity. I tell my kids all the time, humans are the greatest technology on earth. It's not your smartphone, it's not your the AI, it's not your car, your electric vehicle, or whatever. The greatest technology on earth is you,
Yeah.
and how your body is a constant laboratory of chemicals and hormones and chemistry that's happening. I love talking about the primitive brain systems,
Of
right?
course. Absolutely.
And your primitive brain, I explain 6 primitive brain systems to people to really give them a sense of those brain systems. But there's really, of course, more going on
Of
than
course.
those 6. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that words also are actions, right?
Mhm.
We have a tendency to say, think of words not as the same as like if I clap my hands or I move my body. But when you're speaking, right, your mouth is moving. That's an action. And those words are, even when you're not talking, if you stop talking and you listen to yourself, most people, there's a few people that don't have an internal monologue, but most people can hear themselves talking, can hear words going through their mind, and those words are generating activity inside of your body. Your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that creates your emotions, is actually going to be creating those systems inside of you. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about some of the language of emotion, so people can start really thinking about how they can name those emotions more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are having all of that churning up inside of us, if we're not taught to pay attention to it, we're just at the mercy of it,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
it's so important for us, I think, to understand that, in this space where we're talking about our First Amendment rights, right? A lot of people are like, I can say whatever I want to say. I should be able to just say it. Nobody should be able to. Nobody should be upset with me. I shouldn't be canceled. I shouldn't be. But that is not. That's when you don't consider the power of your words. You think you can throw words around because you don't see where they land and how they impact people. That you don't think you cause any harm. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think, this is, again, I'm going to use the word congruence again, because I think you said when you say words or actions, that brings
Mhm.
that up. Like, our words are actions. And there's a saying, sticks and stones. We know that
Mhm.
that saying.
Yeah, sticks
And
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 stones
and
will break your bones, but words will never
words
hurt
will never
you.
hurt me.
Who
Ooh,
said?
right. And so there's a polarity there, right? There's a polarity, and the polarity is words do hurt, because
Mhm.
words come with intention, and words activate one's trauma from from the past.
Mhm.
And when we come to a certain understanding about trauma, and I love that you do this work, when we
Mhm.
when we come to an understanding about what activation can look like, it can hurt less and less, because we begin to have compassion for what's behind another's words that we have, or what could be behind another's words,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things that, again, came up to me as you were talking, especially about the historical harms that have been done, and how this is impacting us, is that as we begin to understand and need to grow from within ourselves, and gain a new understanding of who we are, we also need to understand the trauma and how the trauma has impacted us, so that we can begin to heal from the inside out, right? So
Mhm.
then this, and it's very challenging to do that in a system, in a
Mhm.
circumstance that is continually and perpetually harming, either directly or indirectly, each other, whether
Mhm.
it's internalized or whether it's from outside
Yeah.
sources, right? So I
Yeah.
think
I'm
it's
gonna be.
important to that piece is really important, is that, recognizing that this congruence, this words and action, this congruence, but also recognizing that there is this whole world of healing available to us, and we have to become aware and be willing to engage in that healing. And not only that, but understand that as we have trauma, so do other people that we are
Yeah.
interacting with. And it leads to that compassion, that empathy. And that is what's missing. The empathy is what's
Absolutely.
missing on social media, in other medias, in between people in person. Empathy, the
Empathy.
acknowledging of one human to another.
Yeah.
And again, it comes from, I think, that single story.
Yeah. So to put an extra stamp on that, I say empathy is the answer to the problems that humans are having in this day. Empathy is the missing key. Empathy, as defined as taking the perspective of the other person, taking
Yeah.
on the experience of the other person, being able to step outside of your own brain's calculations and conclusions. And
Mhm.
even though you may feel very, very right, because we are so addicted to being right, we're going to talk about these brain systems, y'all, because it's kicking in all of us
Mhm.
because of how human beings are designed. We upload information, and like she said, we process things. Like when we think back on a situation, it's our brain recalling a memory and playing a narrative
Yeah.
that it has created. It's not the actual thing that happened, it is your tiny sliver of reality that is processing and thinking back from your tiny sliver of perspective and telling yourself that's what happened. Now, it's not to say that it's not your reality, but it doesn't make it the absolute objective truth. And we have a part of our brain called the somatosensory cortex, y'all. I call it the SSC. That's how we abbreviate it. But your somatosensory cortex is the part of your brain that registers pain. And it doesn't distinguish between physical pain and psychological pain. It just sets off a cascade in your body to address the pain. So when we are talking about uh, domestic violence and violence in general, there are people who believe that words can't be violent. That if I didn't touch you, then you should not consider yourself to be harmed. What do you say about that when people say that?
I think in many ways, psychological and emotional violence is the most harmful because it's invisible to another person's eye.
Yes.
When you go outside in the world and you see someone with a black eye or a bruised face, you will say, "What happened?" But
Right.
what happens is when we see someone behaving what we might call acting out, we don't consider what could be going on in the home, what harm
Mhm.
they might have endured, what abuse they might have endured that we can't see.
Yeah.
And so I think that psychological, particularly psychological harm, and but also emotional, they do even more damage because they change the way our brain thinks,
Yeah.
and thus they change our behavior and they keep us in a cycle. They keep us in a cycle. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I wanted to I want to underline something you said about empathy because one of the things that and bring it back around, I think that one of the antidotes to empathy is connection.
Mhm.
I think we're so disconnected and we don't take the time to really connect.
Mhm.
There are people that I feel very close with, that I have wonderful relationships with, that I have never met in person,
Mhm.
you would be one of them,
True.
right? But there's a level of connection that has happened that has allowed me to get to know you. And when we began to connect and get to know each other, that's what allows us to see the humanity in ourselves that connects to another, which gives access to empathy.
Yes. And think about the world and how we have gone towards losing the face to face conversation, right? Now, every time you put a level of technology between communication, you lose something, right? When we're talking face to face, if we're in the same room, I'm feeling your energy, I'm hearing your words, I'm picking up on body language. On the video camera, I get some of that, but I don't get your in person energy. I don't catch those subtle things that might have come from the way your body might stand or slouch or sit in person. And then we go to phones where we can't see each other. We're just hearing, but our brain might be imagining what's going on the other side, but we don't really know. And then we go down to text messaging, which is you lose even more context. You lose that we talk about things being lost to translation. Well, this is the degrading of our words where we're more connected than ever, but
Mhm.
because we're communicating through sound bites, through microscopic throwing out of thoughts, most
Emojis.
of the time impulsively, without seeing how it lands on the other side,
Mhm.
we are increasingly misinterpreting each other in our everyday interactions. So,
That's
this is how words build worlds because
right.
you yourself are a world, you're a kingdom or a queendom or whatever you want to call it, right? Your internal way that we walk around, no one else can ever have your unique internal experience. You
That's
are
right.
one of one, right? However, all of us are built in that same way. So we have 8 billion plus human creators walking around the earth
Yeah.
thinking their version is the truth, the reality, when the whole time our brain is filtering information through things like our reticular activating system. When we're interacting with each other, we're slapping each other with our words, an elbow or two to the brain that we
Mhm.
can't see, but it
Yeah.
is causing damage. So I want to
That's
read a couple of statistics to you. Um, Due to systemic racism, which affects our social structures as well as our policies, both Black women and Black men experience domestic violence at higher rates than other communities. In fact, according to National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 45.1% of Black women experience physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking from intimate partners, while 40.1% of Black men experience those abuses. On average, 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence, that's 33%, and 1 in 4 men experience domestic violence, that's 25%. What do you think about those statistics? Do you think they're accurate, or do you think they're higher, lower?
Oh
What?
no, I mean, they probably are higher because there's unreported. I grew up in a home witnessing domestic violence. I'm a child survivor, and I know that my mother never reported. Like
Mhm,
I know that. So I know that the numbers are probably higher.
mhm,
Who knows how much higher? And because psychological and emotional violence can be so insidious,
mhm.
there are probably people who don't report because they don't even realize it until,
That they're experiencing it. Yeah.
right. They don't realize some people never realize it, but they may not realize it until they're out of the circumstance or situation. And so,
True.
yeah, I believe those numbers are probably much higher.
I completely agree. I would say that if they got to a third on surveying, because we know that people don't often reveal, people may not even
Mhm,
realize that they qualify for these things.
mhm,
There's always that selection bias. And just in my experience as a trauma psychiatrist, I'd say easily half to 75%
mhm,
of people experience. Now, again, this is not when we're talking about domestic violence. I want to be clear that we're talking about something that can be thought of on a dial.
mhm,
That you can be experiencing domestic violence without anybody physically putting their hands on you,
mhm.
because domestic violence is not just physical, although it does get there at times. And again, I want to go back to all domestic violence has a core commonality of uh, it doesn't matter if it's male or female, male with female, male and male, female and female, whatever you consider yourself, human and human in a relationship. There is two people who have emotions, and anger, fear, jealousy, insecurities. These things are things that many people, I don't care how they look on the outside, how cute they look, how adorable and gorgeous and amazing you think they are, how rich they are, how poor they are. People have emotions, they have insecurities, they have challenges, and they don't get any. Most people don't get help with controlling themselves, controlling their emotions, processing things until they're having mental health issues. They may make it to therapy. They might be blessed enough to have insurance and be able to take some medications or something if they have a particular condition, but the average person never touches the mental health. The average person who has these challenges is not in the mental health system. They're walking around the world thinking that there's nothing wrong with them. And I have news for them. If you are yelling at you and screaming at your family members, if you are making snarky, sarcastic remarks and they feel bullied, if you are beating your children because you don't know what else to do for their discipline. These are all things that, yes, you may have experienced these same things growing up because that's what your parents and your ancestors and family knew. I'm here to tell you there's a better way. There's a better way, right? And
Yeah.
because we have not learned it, because we're still coming from a culture that has, I mean, I heard some people be like, well, this, when folks beat each other up, I don't know if I want to judge because I got some times that I don't want to talk about where I was yelling and screaming and potentially
Yeah.
harming my family, my children, the people around me.
Yeah.
So how do we come to grips with the fact that so many of us are don't treat each other right? Let's keep it real. Like there's so many families and households that still talk to each other in harmful ways.
Right.
This tongue, this right here,
Yeah. Yeah.
knocking people over. What do
Yeah.
we do about that?
Well, so there's a recovery saying, a recovery slogan called awareness, acceptance, action. right? Awareness, acceptance, action. So we can become aware. But I think where people get stuck, and sometimes people go from awareness to action, right? They're like, let me fix it. But there's no understanding, acceptance, and work in between there. So that sometimes the action can be more harmful than the previous action, trying to fix it, right? Like glossing over and not having that personal growth. But inside of that acceptance is where the work is of learning new tools, becoming more emotionally fluent. And so it's one of the reasons why I think the work you do, and I think therapy in general, that's right, you cannot take words back. There's a quote that I love, around that I think therapy in general should be considered primary care. I don't
Agreed.
know what that's how our medical system missed that one. But that's a whole nother
That's a whole
nother
yeah,
show.
that's part two. Yes.
That's part two. How did our medical system miss that mental health is actually
Essential.
primary care?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
primary care. So I think that beginning to bridge the gap between that awareness and that action is where the gold is.
Yes.
And becoming aware of our emotions and destigmatizing emotions, period.
Period.
Because in many cultures, including our own, emotions, anything other than happiness and excitement, are wrong or
Yeah,
bad.
I literally just had to try to talk to somebody the other day who was like, well, I know that you think emotions are important, but your emotions, how you feel doesn't matter, doesn't mean anything. And I'm like, there's still so many people who think that way.
Right.
Doc, I don't want to forget to have you tell us about your program, so that people can know how to find you and how to connect with you, because you have such an amazing tool and learning program. I want to make sure we get a chance. So, can you tell us a little bit about your program?
Sure, sure. I want to underline what you said though.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions are information, right? You
Mm-hmm.
said you had to talk some, and I think what it boils down to is when we destigmatize emotions as being bad or wrong, or what good or bad, right or wrong, invalid or valid, the binary, and we
Mm-hmm.
start to look at emotions as being information
Mm-hmm.
that gives us access to the rest. So I just
Absolutely.
wanted to make sure I got that part in. I'm here for the audience, y'all.
Oh no,
But
I
yeah,
love it. I love it. So tell us about your program.
absolutely. So I have a course, and it's called Communication That Transforms. And it really is all about what we've been talking about, understanding how our words, how we process information in the brain, how our words create worlds, and what are the very specific nuanced tools that you can learn how to listen, how to expand the filters that already are there so that you can listen more generously and listen more accurately, and how
Mm-hmm.
to how to get clarification when you don't know what pictures you're creating in another's head or what pictures you're forming about what another's saying. And then what are the words? What are the things to say? What are the powerful questions to ask? What are the responses that navigate resistance in communication with people? That is what this course is all about. It really is a deep dive into how we listen and how we communicate and how we develop emotional intelligence. I have some really cool tools around that as well.
All right. So if you all are interested in that, we will be sharing the link, and the link will also will be in the chat. But it's mindremappingacademy.com /TICC. So you definitely will have the opportunity to work with Dr. Maiysha if you are interested. And it is such a fascinating topic to me, because how this really boils down to me as I summarize what I've heard today and how I'm thinking about it. I think the role of our words cannot be underestimated. We can no longer throw words around as if they don't matter, even if you just, I was just saying something. Like, you can't just be saying something because those words, even if no one's around, they come out of your mouth, they impact you.
That's right.
They set off. If you say ugly things to yourself in the mirror, if you're thinking ugly things, those words are going to drive your mood. They're going to drive the state that you move around in the world, and we interpret information through our words.
Mhm.
We communicate with each other, and even though it's only 7% of our communication, it is such a crucial and important thing to get your words to build and not destroy. So one of the things that's so important to understand is that, we think about babies, and they become toddlers, and they're trying to communicate, and when they can't, what do? When they can't find the words for it, they throw a tantrum. you know and we think that we grow out of this, right? As we think that as we get older and we have more vocabulary, that we don't throw tantrums. But the reality is that we first of all, we saw a grown man recently throw a tantrum on video. I'm not going to go into it on this one, because if you guys want to hear more about want to hear me talk more about domestic violence and the circumstances that are going on today, I'm going to do a special episode where I talk about that specifically and get into some of the ways that we can address domestic violence in our community. That'll be coming up after this and probably be broadcast tomorrow. But I think the most important thing to understand is that as we can communicate better about how we're feeling and are able to recognize and have awareness of our own emotions, it keeps you from blowing up as much. It keeps you from stewing in your own stuff when you can say to the person, hey, I'm feeling upset about this. And this is why you stepped on my shoe. Instead of me punching or fighting you and we're going to jail, me being able to express to the person the behavior that I didn't like, and then them being able to respond back effectively. Oh, it makes sense. If somebody stepped on your shoe or hurt your foot, you'd be upset too. Being able to empathize. Okay, that person has brought this to me. Now I respond back more effectively. So all of the answer to the people who are raging, the people who are getting intoxicated and going off on friends and family and kids and hitting them, or even if you don't put your hands on them, manipulating them through money, manipulating them through the words that you say and how you address them. All of those things are really rooted in lack of emotional control, lack of self-regulation on the part of the individual doing the harm. And so thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Maiysha, to really lay the groundwork for us. Everybody give her a high five, a shout out. Please make sure, where can they find you on social media, Dr. Maiysha?
I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, probably are our most frequent channels, at Dr. Maiysha on Instagram, and then / Dr. Maiysha for LinkedIn.
Awesome. And so if you are a brain geek like me and you love to learn about these things, Dr. Maiysha is a wonderful teacher. So please follow, and engage with her. And so thank you today, Dr. Maiysha, for being here with us. I'm going to close out today. So thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today on the Demystifying Mental Health episode. This is episode 2. I am Dr. Alauna, the trauma psychiatrist. I am the only trauma psychiatrist. And I am here to bring to you education about your brain, your body, and your behavior. And it's time to evolve. It's just that simple. We are in a space where we know that society changes, we evolve with time. And you can look at our history and see there's never been a point in time where things stay the same. But we are in a space now where we are pressed to consciously and intentionally evolve the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about other people, and the way we operate in this world. So in today's episode, we talked about how trauma impacts the brain, how these cycles, these generational cycles that we have been passed, some really, really stinky habits. Okay, this right here, whoo, this mouth, yeah, MOUF, this mouth. These words, they're actions and they're powerful. These words are power packets of sound, and it doesn't matter what language we're talking about, it works the same way. Your brain makes a calculation, you interpret whatever data your body and brain has received, and then you kick out a conclusion, and those words come flying out of you. And it's very likely that you may not be fully aware of how impactful they're going to be on the people around you, but I want you to start seeing when your words ding those other people's somatosensory cortex. Okay? Remember that part that causes pain? Ding! Those words that are said to you this week, this month, until we come back together again, I want you to really pay attention to how your words impact other people and how you feel when you feel the sting of other people's words impacting you. And so just for this time, you focus in on how can I make sure that my words are productive, that they're healthy. When I catch myself being negative, when I catch myself telling myself a story and running this movie that's so damaging to me and what I tell myself about other people, the world, or me, I challenge myself to pay attention to how my words are building my world. All right. So if you are interested in working with me, feel free to come on over to the traumarecoveryacademy.com. That's traumarecoveryacademy.com and join our membership program. We have a membership where not only do you get access to all of my coursework, including Master Your Trauma, Master Your Amygdala, and Empathy Skills Practice, but we do a once a month coaching group where we talk about how do we connect ourselves to what we've learned in the courses and our day-to-day lives. So you also can come if you're one of those people that's like, I really just want to get the quick, dirty, I want to get in here and work on my mental health and just know as much as I can, soak it all up. We have the perfect opportunity for you in our event called the Trauma Cure, Creators Using Radical Empathy. The next Trauma Cure is October 25th through 27th, and you can find tickets. We have our early bird special running where you will receive the VIP package for the regular price of $149. So get your early bird ticket. In the Trauma Cure, we talk about all of these things in more depth. From 10 to 3, it's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so it's a weekend, and we have a good time. We party, and we do all of this right from the comfort of your home or wherever you want to be so that you can get this information and really start your journey in earnest of recovering from whatever trauma that you've had. So our next episode is We Deserve Better, Tackling Racism, Caste, and Mental Health Together. I'm so excited to have my next special guest, Tracy J., lead rebel at The Quiet Rebel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Don't forget to click that like button, and sign up for the notifications for the next episode. I'm Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist, and it's time to evolve.